September 1st, 1894. In 4 hours, fire consumed a stretch of Minnesota the size of modern Los Angeles. Temperatures reached 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The air itself became the weapon. Superheated gas incinerated lungs on the first breath. Official death toll, 418. The real number, historians believe, was twice that. This is the story of engineer James Root, the man who drove a burning train through the center of that storm and pulled hundreds of people out alive. But to understand just how impossible that was, you first need to understand how the storm was built. The disaster had been building for 3 years, since 1891, drought. By September of 1894, less than 2 inches of rain had fallen since May. Swamps dried to cracked earth. Around every settlement lay the slash, mountains of branches, bark, and sawdust left behind by decades of industrial logging, a continuous layer of fuel. Small fires smoldered through the entire summer. People had grown so accustomed to the haze that they stopped registering it as a warning. That was the first fatal mistake. By noon on September 1st, a strong southwest wind picked up. By 1:30 p.m., it surged, and everything that had been smoldering for months received oxygen all at once. 2 fire fronts accelerated rapidly. Around 2 p.m., Brook Park, 9 miles to the south, ceased to exist. 23 dead. Around 2:15 p.m., Mission Creek. When both fronts merged south of Hinckley, the fire stopped being a fire. The combined heat punched a convection column of superheated gas and ash more than 30,000 feet into the sky, higher than commercial airliners fly. At ground level, that meant one thing. Air was being pulled toward the fire from every direction at hurricane force. The fire was feeding itself. Around 3:30 p.m., the firefighters' main hose burned through. The town had no defense left. Some residents ran toward the marsh beyond the river. Tall grass concealed the truth. The drought had emptied it to bare dirt. People sprinted into a dry basin that trapped superheated air. Most died before the flame front ever reached them. They suffocated. The site would later be called the Death Swamp. Many others hid in cellars and wells. A firestorm consumes oxygen from any enclosed space. Most of them suffocated in the dark before the open fire reached them at all. At the telegraph station inside the depot, operator Thomas Dunn didn't leave. While people streamed past his window, he stayed at the wire, coordinating the movement of trains still outside the fire zone. It was the only thing left that could pull anyone out alive. At that moment, a train was approaching the town from the north. Around 4:05 p.m., St. Paul and Duluth, train number 4, engine 69. In the cab, engineer James Root and fireman Jack McGowan. Working the passenger cars, porter John Wesley Blair, one of the few black employees on this route, a man most white passengers wouldn't have looked at twice on an ordinary day. Outside, the smoke was so dense that the lamps were burning at midday. Root could barely see the track ahead. But as the train slowed near the northern edge of the fire zone, the locomotive's headlamp cut through the black smoke and caught movement on the rails, silhouettes running directly toward the engine. He braked. Hundreds of refugees poured into the cars. Their message was the same.
The town is gone. Tracks south are burning. No one left.
I understand.
Root knew this route by heart. Every bridge, every grade, every low spot. 6 miles north, nearly 10 kilometers, Skunk Lake sat beside the right-of-way. A shallow bog, half empty from the drought. filthy, but there was water. He threw the reverser. The train moved backward. The fire hit the train almost immediately. The heat outside was physical, like standing inches from the open door of an industrial furnace. Paint on the wooden car siding blistered, blackened, and ignited from radiant heat alone, before any direct contact with flame. The ties were burning, and the track was losing its shape fast from the heat. One wrong move, and the entire train would leave the rails. The cab windows blew inward from the thermal shock. Root took deep lacerations across his neck and forehead. His hair and eyebrows burned away. His clothing began to smoke. Within minutes, he lost consciousness and dropped to the cab floor. McGowan didn't stop the train. He pulled water from the tender tank and doused the engineer. Root came back with a gasp, grabbed the controls again, then lost consciousness again. McGowan hauled him upright again. This happened multiple times across 6 miles of track. If the train had stopped, everyone inside would have burned with the cars. In the passenger cars, it was its own battle. Windows were shattering, seats were catching fire. Smoke filled the upper half of the cars. The only breathable air was close to the floor. Blair moved through the burning aisles, distributing wet towels, pushing passengers flat against the floorboards, pressing children down and holding them there. When a car was fully ablaze, he got the last passengers out, then left himself. No order from above, no official authority, just a man who knew what had to be done and did it. Outside, the firestorm ran alongside the train. The sound was nothing like a forest fire. It was a low, crushing, unrelenting roar, like artillery firing from every direction at once. Burning embers flew horizontally. Timber on both sides of the right-of-way ignited all at once, 6 miles backward. Over burning ties, Root losing consciousness, McGowan pulling him up. The exterior of the train itself on fire. Passengers on the floor breathing through wet cloth. This was not a train ride. It was a race between the speed of the locomotive and the speed of its own destruction. Around 4:25 p.m., Skunk Lake. A foul, shallow bog, half drained by the drought. About 18 inches of murky water, roughly 45 centimeters, too shallow to shelter in standing up, so people lay down. The train stopped at the edge of the embankment. While passengers jumped down and waded into the bog, Root and McGowan uncoupled the burning tender and moved the locomotive forward on the track. Then they stepped into the water with everyone else. People lay down fully in the mud, faces just above the surface, mouths and noses barely clear. Adults held children up to breathe, while they themselves went under to the chin. They scooped black mud with their hands and smeared it across their faces and any exposed skin. The foul-smelling bog became a heat shield. The firestorm passed directly over them. The wooden cars burned to their steel frames in minutes. Burning embers dropped into the water and hissed. More than 300 people lay in 18 inches of muck and did not move. Water and mud absorbed the radiant heat. That is what saved them. By morning, the landscape was unrecognizable. The fire had burned the organic matter out of the topsoil itself. White ash. Absolute silence. Train wheels had welded themselves to the rails. In the ruins of the depot, rescue workers found Thomas Dunn, the telegraph operator who hadn't left his post while the world outside his window came apart. His final transmission survived on the telegraph tape. He could hear the building burning around him. But the trains were still moving, and someone had to keep the line.
think I've stayed too long.